As I was growing up, the sense of the calling to the priesthood, I'd say got deeper. It was there, it was never intrusive, it was never demanding, but it seemed pretty solid that this calling to the priesthood wasn't simply going to disappear. At the same time, I wanted to be quite sure, given that the Catholic priesthood is quite demanding in the sense that you don't get married as a Catholic priest. So I told, when people asked me, I said, look, yeah, I'm not sure. Yes, I do sense a call to the priesthood, but I'm going to wait. I'm just going to give God time to let me know for sure whether this is something which I've kind of come up with as a child's imagination, or is it something real? Because I was advised by spiritual directors that, look, if it's something real, it will continue to be there. It's not simply going to disappear, that God will keep that gentle call up. So I happily kept going with my life. At the end of year 12, so I go back a bit. So when I was 15, my family decided to migrate to Melbourne, Australia from Sri Lanka. Yes, I was sad to leave my friends. I didn't have a huge attachment to the country itself. I was very happy that my whole family and myself were migrating together. And I was excited at the prospect of coming and living in Australia, particularly in Melbourne. We happened to be going to a school in Sri Lanka, which was an international school with roughly 40 different nationalities. And I was told that there's many nationalities in Melbourne as well. So I thought, oh well, it'd just be an extension of my school. And there were Australians in the school as well, whom I got along with well. So the transition for me was very easy. Particularly because my family was at home. It was quite an adventure for me to come and discover this new vast land. So as I was growing up, again the vocation thought was at the forefront of my mind. I decided simply to keep going. When I finished year 12, my brother had already started studying engineering. I thought, well, I really enjoy engineering as well. So I decided to pursue studies as a civil engineer. So I started that. And throughout my degree as well, this sort of dual sense in me was there. I was really happy to have this thought of priesthood within my heart. At the same time, I was open to marriage. That's where God called me. Like I said before, I was very comfortable with this dual sense. But after a while, I started to realize this vocation journey, my discernment of a call, it wasn't only about myself. It was starting to seriously affect other people's lives as well. For example, I realized, well, if I'm going out with someone and they don't know whether I'm going to become a priest or whether I'm going to be married, obviously it has an impact on that lady's life as well, not just my life. So I decided that, look, I do have to really ask God, okay, God, which path do you actually want me to go? Because it's no longer a game, it's starting to affect other lives besides my own life as well. So I took some time out, and my family knew I was praying about this seriously. And I really sought God's will over a period of time. And I was quite sure at the end of that time that God wanted me to be married. I told my family, look, I prayed about it, and I'm quite sure that marriage is the vocation that God's calling me to say. My name is Father Dishan Candappa. I was born in Sri Lanka to a strongly practicing Catholic family. So my parents, my mum Yvonne and dad Emmanuel, had a profound influence and effect on my vocation journey. We grew up in a prayerful family. So one of my fondest memories of my childhood is going to Mass on Sundays. For us, it was an event. We look forward to it. We used to all get dressed in our best Sunday clothes, and we went off as a family together. Dad and Mum would often do the reading and help at Mass. So it was a joyous event for us to go to Mass on Sunday. We used to pray the Rosary at home. We had to stop what we were doing right about 6 o'clock, and we'd get together and pray. Sometimes for me as a young child, I used to be disappointed to have to stop my game of cricket, my backyard cricket, and come and pray the Rosary. But once I started, I really enjoyed the rhythm of the Rosary. I really enjoyed being there with my siblings and my two parents and praying together as a family. When I was growing up, Mum became a very influential person in just listening to my vocational thoughts, if you like. I call her my first vocations director. She was able just to, she didn't try to push me in one direction or another. She was able just to follow where I was heading, just to be a sounding board and to be able to listen when I said, oh, you know, I think I'm heading towards marriage, or when I was talking about the priesthood and how there's sort of a very deep down sense of a calling towards the priesthood and what that entails. Mum was great at listening. Often it was really late when we'd start talking. She, as a science teacher, had a busy schedule and she'd have to do her markings at home and stuff, and sometimes till after midnight she'll give me time. She'll just let me talk, and I found that profoundly useful. Seeing Dad going to Mass had a huge influence in my life. I didn't realize it as a child. I took it for granted that I thought all dads go to Mass and pray with their family. But now, as a priest, I've come to realize that that's not the case. For many children, they don't have the example of their parents praying at home. They don't have the example of their parents taking them to Mass and giving them that opportunity to build up that great spiritual habit of coming and spending time with Jesus every Sunday. So I'm very grateful. My dad was also the best at going with my change in direction. Some family members, one of my aunts was a Carmelite nun, she's dead now. She was very upset when I decided to go towards marriage. Likewise, my siblings, my brother and two sisters, when I told them that I think God's calling me to be a priest, all three of them were upset. They weren't happy. I expected, as a good Catholic family, I expected that they would be thrilled that their brother wants to be a priest, but it wasn't the case. And they explained to me it was because they believed that they could see me as a married man, and they that's the picture they had of their brother, someone who's married and as a family man. So for them it is a big shake-up of who they saw me to be, or who they saw me to be in the future. So I would go so far as to say that I very much doubt I would have become a priest without the influence of my parents. Like I said, not because they pressurized me in any way whatsoever. Not once did they push me in either direction, but because of how I could see what our Lord meant to them, how much they gave of themselves. This might sound strange to the modern generation, but sometimes my parents would get a call at 9 o'clock at night from the parish priest saying, oh look, can you come in, please help me? He was working on something for the next day. Mum and Dad would go without any question and help the priest and help him happily. So they were happy to give of their life for the church, and that had a great influence on me. Obviously I didn't understand that as a child, but when I grew up I realized how much the church, how much Jesus meant to my parents. And that had a profound influence on how I lived my life, and my final ability, if you like, through God's grace, to be able to say yes to the vocation of my priesthood.
So obviously, as you got a bit older, you came to the point where you had to decide what to do when you finished school.
Yes.
Do you want to share a little bit about that time?
Sure. Yeah, really, it kind of started much earlier for myself. I still find it difficult to describe it, but probably at about the age of 6 or so, something inside me said, it wasn't a voice, but I had a sense that God wanted me to be a priest.
Right.
I had no idea what that calling involved, but I just have a very clear memory of a sense of God revealing to me somehow, definitely not audibly, that this was His plan, that He'd like me to be a priest. And so I was very comfortable with that idea, although I didn't know too much what it meant. When I got to my early teens, I realized there was another big vocation as well. So mum and dad happily married with their own family. And then I thought, look, that's a beautiful vocation as well. And I was kind of, that sense of calling to the priesthood hadn't gone down, it was there. At the same time, I was very comfortable with the idea that, hey, look, marriage is wonderful as well. So maybe God's calling me to that.
Yeah.
I very happily fence sat for years. I was very comfortable with thinking, well, maybe priesthood or maybe married life. And God will show me at the right time.
Can you talk a little bit about both seminaries
Sure.
and what life was like?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So in 2002, I joined Carleton in Melbourne with 8 other seminarians. A magnificent group, a really special group with a massive age variation. Our youngest 2 were 19, I was 29 at that stage, and our oldest was 55. He was a medical doctor. I had been a medical doctor for 30 years at that stage. So we had a fantastic first year group, and we were very close as a year group together, and we bonded very closely. So I had 3 years in Carleton, and they were great years. Like I said, I had that profound freedom of not having the pressure of thinking, well, I have to make sure I reach the final goal of being a priesthood. That wasn't on my mind. I just wanted to enjoy the time God gave me in the seminary, whether it was 1 year or whether it was all the way to ordination. So in first year was an amazing year for us. In second year, the attention goes off the seminarians a little bit because they're focused on next year's first years. So it was just a beautiful year with where we could just enjoy our prayer and study life and enjoy the company of 8 other very special people. In third year, the Archbishop let me know that he'd like me to continue my studies in Rome, and that sounds very exciting, and I was excited about it. At the same time, I realized it will be very difficult for me to leave my family who's in Melbourne, to leave this group of seminarians whom I started my journey with, and go to a totally unknown place to study in Italian and to start again in a seminary 4 times the size of what I was leaving. So I was apprehensive, but I believed because the Archbishop had asked me and because God speaks to me through my ordinary, I believed, look, that's what God's asking me. So I'll say yes and trust that God will look after me. Sure enough, the first year was very difficult. I'd put it as one of the hardest years of my life. I really missed my family. I missed the seminary here. It was a bit more impersonal at the North American College at the beginning because there were nearly 200 of us from 44 which we were here. And studying in Italian was a huge struggle because I only knew conversational Italian, and suddenly to be studying at university level and studying theology in a different language. Theology is hard enough in English. Was a challenge for sure, but God helped me through that here. I remember at one stage thinking, well, all I have now is God. All my usual comforts are not there. I don't have my family, I don't have my closest friends, I don't have the country I love the best. So I either turn stronger to God, or I have to go back and just tell my bishop, look, it's too hard, I need to get back. But I decided, look, I'm just going to get through the first year. That's the advice I've been given. First year's going to be tough, get through the first year and then decide. So I got through the first year, and by that time my Italian got better and better. I started to get to know Italian families. We had to go out and do pastoral work outside Rome and things like that. And I started to love it enormously. The next 4 years, which I had, were excellent, amazing years. Traveling to different parts of Europe, going on pilgrimage, working in countries like Slovakia, Poland, and different parts of Italy, working pastorally, was profoundly enriching. And yeah, I love those 4 years. Now consider them a great blessing. I was able to meet Pope Emeritus Benedict as well. During one of our anniversaries, he invited the whole seminary to his place in the Vatican. So that was a massive highlight as well.
Wow. Sounds pretty good. So now I just want to ask a little bit about as a priest now,
Yes.
do you feel like you've got a specific call within the call? So is there a particular charism that you feel like you bring as a priest, or a particular group of people that you really feel called to minister to?
Sure. So when I was ordained a priest, I was ready, obviously, to do whatever my bishop asked me. I was very clear, and in the seminary, I'd come to a clear understanding that, look, the archbishop or bishop has a picture of the full diocese, and you do best by you serve the church and therefore Jesus best by simply doing whatever he asks you to do in terms of ministry and where he places you in a parish, etc. I was fully ready for that. I didn't have any particular big plans of what directions I'd like to go and stuff. But in my first year back from Rome, Archbishop Hart asked me to be the director of the Guild of St. Stephen, which is an organisation for order servers. I was a bit apprehensive because I'd only served for a year in my entire life, and I never felt hugely called to help train order servers in how to be better servers and things like that. But again, because Archbishop Hart had asked me, I thought, look, it's a great opportunity, particularly because we know that many vocations come out of the Guild of St. Stephen. So, okay, I'm not sure whether I can do what's required, but I will, as the Archbishop asked me, I will say yes. And so I've been the director now for 6 years now, and it's been very fulfilling of seeing almost a generation of young people who come, and we hold a conference once a year as well. So I've seen them grow up 5-6 years and seeing them grow in the faith. So we always make sure there's a strong faith component to our conferences and not just serving. And then 3 years ago now, I was asked for that be the youth chaplain. Again, that was totally out of the blue. I was very happy to say yes to that. I've always enjoyed working with young people, and I saw it as a great privilege to do that and to be able to assist the youth office in their ministry. So it looks like through God's calling, through my bishop, that I've been asked to work with young people, which I find profoundly, it's a profound privilege to do that, and I'm very happy to give as much time as I must before somebody else gets the role, to do what I can in helping the young people draw closer to Christ. But I guess that will be what I'd sense a calling within the call.
Yeah.
Not through a particular desire I've had, but through my bishop asking me to do those roles. But yeah.
Great. Just speaking a bit more generally now, thinking about what are some of the greatest joys of being a priest, or that you've experienced through your priesthood?
Sure. Interestingly, just the joy of being a priest, I assumed that would sort of plateau and perhaps just go down a bit after the honeymoon period. And perhaps in one sense, the huge exhilaration of being a priest did dip after a few months or a year. But now I've found, I'm 8 years a priest now. I'd say a couple of years ago, I found, it's difficult to describe, a greater appreciation of the priesthood, a greater joy, a greater privilege of simply being called to be a priest freely. Obviously not because I'm super special or anything. God calls whoever he wants, and I'm absolutely certain that he's called me to be a priest. And I'm just coming to realize the greatness of the calling itself. So that surprises me a little bit, because I didn't think it would continue. I thought, well, once you become a priest, you kind of get over it and just, minister. In terms of the actual ministry, two things clearly stand out. Celebrating Mass is always profoundly special, just to realize that God becomes present through the words of the priest and the power of the Holy Spirit. But if the word priest doesn't say those words and doesn't have the intention of consecrating the true presence of Jesus, doesn't become present. It's as simple as that. So I do sense a profound honor to be there at that moment. to hold God in my hand and to feed as a good father and as a spiritual father, to feed the children or the people He has placed in my care. It's a profound experience, and one I cherish very much as a priest. The other is the sacrament of reconciliation. I'm still trying to comprehend the greatness of the sacrament, that a person can walk in any state of their moral life, and to be able to walk out forgiven in a state of grace through a 5-10 minute encounter of Jesus through the priest. Out of all the things I do, even in context of working with the youth office, I'd say that the 45 minutes I sit in during Holy Hour in the confessional is where I'm of greatest service to the young people. It is an amazing sacrament. I've been surprised that it helps me as well. Even when I'm sitting there as the priest, the sacrament of reconciliation it helps me in my faith as well and strengthens me spiritually as well. So it's not something I didn't expect the graces to flow from the penitent to myself as well. But there's definitely an interaction there for sure. But yeah, without a doubt, I'd place celebrating Mass and being the minister of reconciliation is to the top two.
Great,
but, yeah.
Sounds pretty good. And I think you've spoken already about what strength you draw from your daily prayer to help you get through those challenges.
Yes.
So maybe we'll move on to more, I guess you have quite a role with young people through the Guild and also through the youth office.
Yes.
So I assume you have some, regular interactions with young people, and in particular in the area of vocations, do you get an opportunity to kind of talk to people one-on-one about helping them discern their vocations? And also, what advice do you give to people in those situations, or just generally, what advice do you give to young people who are trying to discern their vocation?
Sure. Yes, I do. To answer your question, it is a great privilege for someone to come and ask you to guide them about where they think God is calling them. And I'm very conscious that I'm not being called to tell them what I think. I'm being called to help them to hear what the Holy Spirit is telling themselves. It's tricky. It's far from easy. I'm convinced I've got the big picture correct, so I'm happy to help them with the confidence that I've been through this struggle over almost a couple of decades in my own life. So basically, I see it as God having a particular plan for that person, and that person trying to work out what plan is. I know there are a couple of theories even in the Catholic understanding. Some would say God doesn't have a plan A, whether you go towards marriage or priesthood, God will just work with that. And if it's marriage, God doesn't have a particular person in mind. It's just marriage in general, and He leaves it kind of up to you. I'm kind of on the contrary view. I believe because God knows us so intimately and loves us so intimately, that before we were born, before we were even conceived, that He has a plan A in mind for us. If He don't follow that plan A, it doesn't mean He abandons us and say, well, you stuffed up, so I'm just going to leave you. He'll work with our plan, with the plan B or the plan C or whatever we allow Him to, at whatever level we allow Him to, He'll still work with us. But I do believe there is a plan A. So I try to ask the young people, firstly, perhaps the most important is to have patience. It's not easy in modern society. We want things instantly. So one of the biggest dangers for young people is they're ready for their vocation and they want God to tell them today or within this year, God, by the end of this year, you have to tell me what vocation you're calling me to. God doesn't always work with our timetables, and often God needs, and I know this is true in my life, God needs to prepare the soul to say yes, and that involves sometimes a painful chipping away of stuff, adding on extra graces or extra skills which the person didn't have. It's a lot of work that God does to the soul to bring them to the point to say, this is what I'm calling you to do. Do you say yes or no?
It's really courageous, so thanks for sharing.
Pleasure, Annalise. Thanks for interviewing me.
Shalom World Television is coming to Australia. This is a great gift. It's been gifted to many parts of the world, and now it's our Australian turn to receive it with open arms. I welcome it, I bless it. It's going to really support family life, married life, youth, give us a resource that we know that we need really great help in these areas. May Almighty God bless this new resource coming to our land, in the name of the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Shalom World, God's own channel.